Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hi, this is Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast. We are on episode 26 of the podcast this week. And this week is going to be just me. I'm going to talk about a topic that I'm familiar with from my experience, and actually something that I am currently dealing with as well. I also want to take some time and just let you guys know, if you guys are podcast subscribers, first off, thank you so much for subscribing to the podcast. We have just seen incredible growth of our listenership and subscribers in just the past, we started in March was episode 1. So what is that, like 6 months, 5 months about. So really, really thankful for that, and happy that we can be providing some kind of value through the podcast and the blog. If you guys are just podcast listeners and you don't know about the blog yet, there is a blog component to the New Warehouse as well, which you can check out at thenewwarehouse.com, and definitely go there. With every podcast episode, there's an additional blog post that has some further insight, further information, links to companies that are featured, and reports and visuals and all those different kinds of things to kind of give you some supplement to the topic discussed. So definitely check that out. And you can also go to thenewwarehouse.com to sign up for our email newsletter, which goes out every Monday morning, except when there's a holiday. Like last week, we sent out on Tuesday morning. But that just covers a little bit about that week's episode, and it has a link to the episode as well on the blog. It also has some further insights as well. And I'll be expanding upon the email newsletter in the coming month or so with some additional information and potential further things to be announced as well with the New Warehouse that I'm very excited about. So definitely head over to thenewwarehouse.com and check that out. You can also interact with us on Instagram at the New Warehouse, Twitter at the New Warehouse as well. And you can find us on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. Links to all of that are on thenewwarehouse.com too. So thank you again for being a listener. Thank you so much for interacting and finding value in this podcast. That's really, really the whole point of this, is just to give some insight, different ideas, knowledge, all different kinds of things about our industry, and give you a place to learn more about our industry, and also a place for you to contribute more for the industry too. So if you're listening and you have something you'd want to talk about on the New Warehouse podcast, definitely reach out to me. You can reach out to Kevin at thenewwarehouse.com through email, or you can head to the website, thenewwarehouse.com, and go there, and you can find my email there to contact me as well. I'm definitely happy to have anybody on the show with an interesting topic. So this week I wanted to talk about something that I've been involved with for a couple of years now. So if you guys listen to the episode called Why the New Warehouse, that's me, and just discussing all about my background and what I've been involved with, and what kind of led me to the idea of creating the New Warehouse and doing this whole thing. So my background really is in inventory control in distribution centers, and a lot of that has been with new distribution center startups as well. So like brand new buildings, basically walking in and, it's 4 walls, and maybe in some cases the 4 walls are not fully complete yet, but going from the ground up basically. So in inventory control, one thing that I've been involved with in a couple projects is slotting. And that's what I wanted to talk about this week, because I'm actually involved in a slotting project right now that I'm working on for a company. So slotting, if you're not familiar, slotting is basically the process of organizing inventory in the warehouse. And there's a lot of different ways that you could go about doing that. And in some cases, we'll talk to about, maybe slotting is not a necessity for you. Maybe slotting is not something that's really needed for you, depending on your operation and what's going on there. So, but basically slotting is looking at your inventory and placing it in the best possible location in your warehouse to optimize your operation. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. So to give you an idea of kind of my experience in slotting, so you guys have kind of a baseline of, whether I know what I'm talking about or not. So, I've done slotting for a couple different operations, a lot of different styles and focus. One of the most complex slotting plans and projects that I've ever done was I was involved with this company, and they fulfilled for like drugstores basically. So drugstores, grocery stores, and it was a lot of stuff that drugstores and grocery stores don't really want to carry in their own warehouse. So when it came to grocery stores, it was like cosmetics and hair care products and things like scrunchies and hair ties, all those different kinds of things. And it was a lot of SKUs. I think it was like 20,000 some SKUs. And all of it was very much piece pick. Is very rare that a lot of cases were going out the door. So a lot of small things like eyeliner, pencils, mascaras, individual pieces, all those kinds of things. And those come, could be several hundred to a case. And, obviously grocery stores are not looking to put several hundred eyeliner colors on their shelves. So that was the most complex, and then I've worked in different environments where I've done slotting for mostly large items, case items, and there we looked at different location types and what type of orders we're shipping out for what type of products. So a lot of different experiences and a lot of different things. And I think the one thing, looking at different operations, really the question for you is, to slot or not to slot, right? So mostly, if you're going to look at e-commerce situations and, things where you have piece pick, all those different types of many SKUs, then you definitely want to slot, because you're going to have your 80-20 rule where 20% of your SKUs are going to be the bulk of your business, and you're going to be going to them all the time, picking from them all the time. You want to make sure that you have them in the best location possible, so that you're picking up, or not necessarily picking up, but reducing the amount of time it takes to pick those items, because you're going to be picking them often, right? You're going to keep going back to those items. So that's something to consider. But if you have just a handful of SKUs, I didn't work in this operation, I'm familiar with this operation. It was a bottled water company, and they had a temporary space. I think they had 4 SKUs in the space, and they not only did they have a minimum amount of SKUs, but they had an incredibly quick inventory turn on those 4 SKUs. So there was really no point to slot there, because you have 4 SKUs. They're going to go in and out of the building, basically set up the building four quadrants, basically. One SKU goes there, one SKU goes there, there. There's no real need for one of those SKUs to be closer to the shipping dock than the other. So that's one example of where you wouldn't really need to slot. But I think as you increase the number of SKUs that you have, it's definitely something that's necessary in order to keep some organization within the warehouse and really drive some more efficiency and productivity. Because if you guys are familiar with lean and all of that culture, one of the biggest things about lean is obviously reducing waste, right? And one of the biggest wastes that's out there is transportation. And transportation is not just, as the first thought might be, transportation, trucking, right? Transportation is any type of movement within the operation. So why, if I'm taking 100 steps a day to go from my workstation to grab some type of supply, why am I not having that supply closer to my workstation, right? So the same goes for inventory and picking of inventory. Why? If I'm going to this same SKU multiple times a day and it's in one of the farthest locations away from where I drop off my picks to be processed for shipping, why don't I move it closer to shipping, right? The other thing you want to consider too is how large is your space. So, if your space is not very large, you only have a couple racks, then maybe, slotting is not as necessary as a larger warehouse with lots of locations. This is because, there's only so much difference in transportation time, that pick path time, or pick travel time that we just discussed, right? So that's the first step is, am I going to slot or am I not going to slot? And then, there's the idea of slotting itself. And we talked briefly about what is the goal of slotting, but really the goal of slotting is to overall increase your operational flow. And a lot of times slotting, the focus is on making picking better, but I think that slotting has an overall effect on the entire operation, not only for picking, but I think it's big on the receiving put away side as well, because on the put away side, you end up reducing travel time, because if your item is slotted, then the put away person knows exactly where they're going to put their product, right? You should have some type of, depending on your system, should have something that's defaulting to tell you where that dedicated location is for that item. Or maybe you have some kind of guide based on item type. Whatever the case may be, every operation is a little different, and obviously every company has different types of items, sizes, all different kinds of SKUs. So I think that not only does it help to optimize your pick path and create more efficiency on the picking side, but I think it helps to optimize more on your inbound side as well. And you can also have it help you on your shipping side as well, because if you're looking at different types of shipments in your operation, say you have some bulk shipments, full pallet, and then you also have piece shipments as well, you may have two different areas to process those different shipping. So if you have one SKU that's looking like it's the primary or the bulk of orders for that SKU typically go out LTL, full truckload, then you know that you're going to want to put that SKU closer to the area to process larger shipments, right? Whereas you have an item that typically goes out in pieces, goes just UPS or FedEx, whatever the case may be, then you want to put that item closer to that processing area, right, if you have them in separate locations. The other thing is that, slotting can help you utilize your space a little better, because if you don't necessarily have dedicated space for items, then you end up with the same item scattered throughout your warehouse. And in some cases, depending on how you have it set up, that item may have partial pallet quantities scattered throughout the warehouse, where if you have these dedicated picking locations, then your partial quantities you have to take the action, of course, to consolidate, but it gives you a better idea.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Where you can consolidate these things too. So if you're hurting for space, then you know that, okay, like I have a partial pallet over in this location. Let me get it out of there, and I can fit it into my primary pick location. Now I just freed up a space, right? So that's very important too. So that's really the goal of slotting. And now I want to discuss the things that you really need to ensure proper slotting, and then we'll kind of talk about, a process to get to the point of slotting from a prep standpoint, and then it's all about executing, of course. So things to ensure proper slotting. First off, the biggest thing, I think, to have a good slotting plan and really see the benefits of it is that you have to have good data. Absolutely, you have to have good data to work with, because slotting really starts with the data, because you want to see the usage of your items. So you want to see how has your whatever window you decide. I recommend looking at things, for if you're just starting out slotting, then I would look at things over the last 12 months to give you a good range of where you are throughout the different times of the year, and give you kind of a basis of, what has been your fastest moving items throughout that year. And you really want to focus in on those to get started, because those are what's going to see the most action, right? And then as you start to close in, you probably want to look once a quarter, but there's all different kinds of things that go into play there, especially the type of business that you're in, because you may see items that change, over seasons, like cosmetics, colors change, clothing, obviously, things change from season to season, all those different types of things. But you want to make sure that you have really good data, and the data that you're going to want to be looking for is that usage of your products, forecast data, what's to be expected, your hits data, basically. So your hits data would be how many times has that item been picked, right? So you have to think about it in two ways, right? So there's the hits, which is how many times have I gone and picked that item? But then there's the usage, which is how many units of that item have been picked, right? And then there's the forecast, which is how many units of that item will be picked. So you could have something has usage of 1,000 pieces, but it was only picked twice for 500 pieces on each order, right? So it's not something that's getting picked often, even though it's a lot of quantity. So it's really important to differentiate those two, because you're going to use both of them to make sure that you have the right slotting. But where that comes into play is your hits is going to tell you really where does that item rank, and based on that ranking is you want to give it your optimal pick location, right? So my item that has top amount of hits, most hits of all my items, I want to make sure that I have that one closest to the beginning of my pick path and closest to my shipping area, right? And that's because If you want to have it as the beginning of your pick path, and that's where you get the most picks, you want people to go as least amount of time in the entire pick area as possible. So if you have everything that has the most hits up front in your pick path, then the majority of the time they shouldn't be going further past those items, right? Because that's where all your action is happening. Now, your forecast and usage is going to tell you how much you need to have in that pick location. So ideally, you want to replenish your inventory as little as possible. But you have to do that within reason, of course, right? It all depends on how much space you have to utilize, where you're at, whether you're working with an existing warehouse, going into a new warehouse, and you can design it exactly how you want. But if you're working with what you have, you want to make sure that you can fit, at least a bulk of what you're getting hits on and the bulk of your business within your pick area. And you taking that into consideration, you want to make sure that you can get a significant amount of usage on hand. So right now, what I'm working on is that I can get 5 days of usage in my pick location. And that's, you may have a run on a product and it may not last you 5 days, but on average, that's what 5 days has been. So you want to look at that and make sure that you have enough space allotted for that amount of days, or whatever usage you decide is the right amount for you. So by doing so, you're taking into account your forecast and usage, and then you're taking that and you're going to figure out, depending on what type of products you have, whether it's if you're going to be picking by eaches or pieces, then you want to figure out, well, how many pieces do I need to have in that location to sustain 5 days of inventory, right? Or if you're looking at larger product that you're shipping like B2B in case quantities, pallet quantities, how many pallets do I need to have in those locations, right? And that all depends on type of locations too, because you could have regular rack, pallet rack, you could have hand stack, shelf racking, you could have bins, you could have flow rack, all those different kinds of things. So the other data that's really, really important to have is that item data, like how much is on a pallet, how much is in a master case, what's the cube of the item, all depending on the type of location, then you need that location data as well. So if you have multiple different kinds of locations, then you want to see, what location can fit what type of product. So, for example, the one slotting project I work on, which was probably the most complex one that I've ever done. That was basically we had shelving bins in the middle of the pick area, and then we had flow rack on the outside of those shelving bins, basically with the pick face pointing in towards the slotting the bins. And it was all small pieces of items. So, we put our fastest moving stuff on the flow rack because we could load it up with more stock behind it, right? Because the idea of flow rack is that you replenish it from the back and you can keep several cases stacked up. So when one's empty, you pull it out, the next one comes down. And then slower moving stuff on the inside path of the bins because that was further away from the flow rack. But the layer of complexity there was that we sold to our customers by the layer. So we carried multiple manufacturers, and basically we would tell the customer, we had certain agreements with customers that we would ship their order out so that it would we would have multiple manufacturers in one case, but each manufacturer would be separated in the box by a sheet of paper or a different layer, right? So then we had to take that into consideration with the slotting, and that just added a whole level of complexity. But in doing so, we needed to make sure that we were utilizing all those different locations in the right way. And I will say that we miscalculated on some stuff at first, and we ended up with too many products in the flow rack, and we had to adjust after. And that's one thing too. I think that's important to try and do from experience, is that having knowledge of the physical product as well is really important, because if you have some cube data, dimension data that's off, then it's gonna throw you off, definitely. So having somebody involved in the project that has familiarity with the product that you actually have and what the cases are like and all those different types of things can be a big help too. So it's really important to get that, because that, well, I have certain items that actually can't fit in these types of locations. So I know that they can't go in there, right? So before I map out and assign all those locations to something else, I know that I gotta put that one in there. So that's why it's important to understand the different types of locations you have and that data as well. What can fit in there, what can't fit in there. And the other thing is, when we're talking about things that can fit in there, can't fit in there, you may have different zones within your warehouse as well for different types of products. So you may have items so maybe you have a system with conveyance, and you're putting things on the conveyor, or you're putting it in some other type of automated solution, but you have items that are larger and that won't fit on the conveyor. They're non-conveyable. Now you have a different zone for that. So you want to take all that into account as well when you're laying out the slotting plan. So when you get that data, you want to look at your usage, your forecast, to determine how much do I need to keep in my location. When you determine that, then you want to make sure that you take the time to figure out what your min-max on that location should be as well. And the min-max will help you to make sure that you're keeping the stocking level where it needs to be, right? So you should be able to have some type of trigger, whether it's manually or system-driven, that when you hit that min, just like just like a reordering point, but you want to hit that min for that location to physically replenish it from your bulk storage that you have, right, or your reserve storage. And so as you're figuring out how much that's going to be, at the same time you can calculate that min-max as well. So my suggestion to make your slotting plan really come together well is to take the time to create a whole map of your pick locations in Excel, and make sure that you know how many either pallets or how many bins per cell in Excel there are in location, and map out the whole thing. And then as you're determining where you can place your products, then you can put those product names right into the map. It makes it easy to reference, makes it easy to visualize without totally physically moving everything beforehand. And then once you have the map solidified, then it's easy to execute on as well, because you can hand it to an operator and you can say, okay, this is what's going to go here. You see, this is where you're standing right now. This is aisle 2, this is aisle 3, and these are the things that are going to go in there. So I find that very helpful. And also it's helpful for other folks as well who are not so familiar with slotting, because they can start to visualize it too before you start to make any physical moves. So once you determine those things, the other things you want to think about too is, of course, you want to understand what pick locations you have available to you. In doing so, obviously you want to keep safety in mind first, right? So you don't want to be breaking full pallets from 30 feet in the air on top of your rack. So you want to make sure that you're using pick locations that are closer to the ground. If they're full pallet and you have to break them open, and your product is not stable without wrap or something like that, you want to keep that in mind. The other thing too is you want to think about ergonomics, and Thinking about ergonomics is, it may seem like a minor thing. So if I have flow rack, say I have like 3 levels of flow rack. Well, it may seem like just a small amount of difference between picking from the middle flow rack and the bottom flow rack, but the ergonomics of it is probably that you're picking from your middle flow rack is going to be a lot better for the picker than picking from the bottom. And over time, if you have items that, say, have more hits from the bottom, then that's going to take a toll on your productivity. Not only is it going to take more time because they're going to take that extra second, maybe extra 2 seconds to bend down and pick from the bottom level of flow rack, but it's going to save you there, and it's going to save you possibly on strain on your picker as well, and which can wear on the picker over time and possibly slow them down throughout the day, throughout the week. So you definitely want to consider that too, and that's something that may seem minor that could get overlooked, but you want to make sure that you do that as well. The other thing too that I've learned, unfortunately, from experiencing it, is that you want to make sure that you keep some flexibility of space for new items. And each company is different on how often they introduce new items and how often items come and go. But you want to make sure that you leave some flexibility for new items and that you can easily slot them in somewhere. And the difficult part about new items, of course, is that typically you don't know how are they going to sell. So you don't really know where to put them. So if you have a spot where you can slot in new items, and then as you monitor them over time, you can move them around into where they really end up being based on how popular they are or how unpopular they are. Hopefully for your company, they are popular. But the other thing that's important about that, and I've seen this happen, is that we were talking about put away and receiving earlier. So when you have new items come in, you want to have them slotted ahead of time, because you want, when receiving gets them, you want them to know what to do with those items right away, instead of just putting them away in any place, and then it's inevitable that they're going to put them away probably to a bulk location somewhere, and then orders are going to start dropping. Now you're going to take the extra step to pull it out of the bulk location, find the pick location for it. Maybe it doesn't get slotted correctly, and that whole thing. So you want to make sure you have that process in place. So once you map out your slotting plan and then go through all your data, make sure that you have things in the right spot, then it's all about, obviously you have to do the physical moves to move everything around, but then it's about maintaining your slotting. And how do you maintain your slotting? So just like everything with inventory control, maintaining your slotting is all about discipline, right? So obviously you want to communicate to your teams within the warehouse, that if this is the first time you're slotting or you've just reslotted, that, they'll notice that there's some changes to where things are located, and, to keep them aware of where things are supposed to be. It's useful to put the product number that's supposed to be in that location there as well, so they can see that, right? And then it's easily identifiable too. If you're doing your walk through, you can look and you can see, oh, there's something in this location that doesn't match the tag that says it's supposed to be there. And then you can fix it, but then you can also go back and see who was the person that put it there, so you can communicate to them that, like, hey, you did something outside of the process, and you know that this is supposed to be here. And maybe you have a new hire or something that's, not used to that, and you can take the corrective action needed at that point. The other thing is what we talked about before, is as you're determining your usage and how much product you're going to put in your pick location, you can determine your min-max. So your min-max you can set up in the system if you have those capabilities, or you can do something that's manual, like having a level set and, have a picker call out when a replenishment is needed, or have somebody drive through. and take a look and fill up things that need to be filled up. But having them in max will help you ensure that your slotting is staying maintained, because you can change around locations, your pick locations, assign pick locations, put labels on the location. But if you're not keeping the product in the location, then your slotting was kind of pointless, because the whole idea is to keep from having to replenish for your orders. You just want the product to be there when the picker goes and the order drops already, right? So the other thing is that if you have the capability in the system, you want to make sure that you're assigning these locations to the product as well. And then as you get a good slotting plan in place for your operation and you think that the process is good, you want to monitor it over time. So there may be things that you did slot and then the product goes obsolete or it just dies for whatever reason. You want to make sure that you're reviewing that slotting placement frequently and often. I would recommend at least doing it at least once a year, if not every quarter. But you want to monitor too and see, like, are there items that are getting a lot of hits all of a sudden that are picking up? And now maybe you want to expand the amount that you have in the location. Maybe there's something that's not really getting any hits anymore, even though it was before. So you want to make sure that you keep reviewing, keep maintaining, and looking at all those different types of things. So slotting is really something that I think is important. But like I said, not every operation has a necessity to slot based on how it goes and your product mix, all those different types of things. But there's a lot of factors to consider, and definitely a lot of complexity that can be involved. But if it's something that you can implement in a good way, or even just implement for maybe your top 10 SKUs or top 50 SKUs, I think that you'll see a good positive impact in your operation overall, and it'll definitely increase the efficiency and optimize your pick path in a big, big way. So really interested to hear how you guys, the listeners, go about slotting your facilities. I can always learn more, and we can all always learn more. So happy to hear from you. You can email me at kevin@thenewwarehouse.com. Also post some more information about this and some of my thoughts on the blog as well at thenewwarehouse.com. So really, thank you guys so much for listening every week. And, if it's something that you really enjoy, feel free to give me a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Google Music if you're listening there. And, of course, reach out to us and share with your colleagues as well. So thanks so much for listening this week. And then we can find more information on thenewwarehouse.com.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.